Charles Krauthammer of Fox News weighed in on what he thinks is going to happen with Trump care and the future of healthcare in America. And he said something that kind of surprised me.
Charles, where do you think we are in this debate over Obamacare and healthcare in general, both politically and in terms of the policy as evidenced in this legislation?
I think historically speaking, we're at the midpoint. We had 7 years of Obamacare, a change in expectations, and I would predict that in less than 7 years we'll be in a single-payer system. I think that's the great irony of this. Obamacare failed at every level. Politically, the Democrats were crushed over 6 years and 4 elections, where, as you say, they lost seats in the House, the Senate, the governorships, etc., largely because of Obamacare. It failed on the ground, as was pointed out earlier. The insurers are in a death spiral. The Obamacare exchanges are collapsing. You've had these exchanges, these community exchanges, completely disintegrating. But the irony is, in the end, I think Obamacare wins the day because it changed expectations. Look at the terms of the debate. Republicans are not arguing the free market anymore. They have sort of accepted the fact that the electorate sees health care as not just any commodity. It's not like purchasing a steak or a car. It's something that people now have a sense the government ought to guarantee.
That's a right.
Right. And because of that, even Republicans are trying to say, oh, we're not going to lose that many. Oh, yes, you'll be covered on if you have a pre-existing condition. The terms of debate are entirely on the grounds of the liberal argument that everybody ought to have.
So how do we get
Once that happens, you're going to end up with a single payer.
Well, I was going to say, how do you get to single payer? Are you saying that the Senate is not going to pass this repeal and replace plan?
In the short run, I think the Senate is not going to accept the House plan. It'll come up with a plan of its own. They'll go to conference. Who knows where it's going to end up, but it's going to be a rickety arrangement. It's likely that Republicans are going to suffer at the polls. And as a result of that, if that happens, you're going to get a sea change in opinion. Then there are only 2 ways to go: to a radically individualist system where the market rules, or to single payer. And the country is not going to go back to radically individualist.
Mercedes?
That's quite an analysis. It's a very rosy analysis for progressives and liberals. But the only way that happens is if we fight. I think he kind of grandfathers that into his argument that, well, the progressive base, the liberal base, they're going to fight, and they're going to fight hard, and they're not going to stop until they win. That's the part that we need to stress, because we're the ones who are in the trenches. So you have to call your congressman and tell them support Medicare for all, or else. You have to go to justicedemocrats.com/single-payer and sign the petition in support of Medicare for all. And there has to be the groundswell. And no, the politicians are not going to do that willingly. You have to drag them to it, even Democrats. We originally had, I think it was 72 co-sponsors to John Conyers' bill, Medicare for all. Now we got it up to 104. So we're chipping away, but we got to keep going because they're not going to go easily. So I think he's a little wrong in that he feels like, you know, the Democratic politicians are okay with single payer. They're not there yet, Charles. I wish they were, but they're not there yet. But it is interesting that he's kind of admitting there, like, yeah, you can't win the argument. Our position can't win the argument, talking about the conservatives. Because what is the real conservative position? You know how, you know, the progressives and liberals, when you ask us, what's your ideal healthcare system? You get an answer like that. Single payer, Medicare for all. That's it. That's it. When you ask conservatives, Charles Krauthammer's point is they don't, like, especially Republicans in Congress, they don't have anything to say. There's nothing to say. Remove the lines around the states so the health insurance companies can go wherever they want, and tort reform so that you can't have frivolous lawsuits. There's no easy answer. But what Charles Krauthammer is saying is the real, you know, tried and true, correct conservative position is free market for healthcare. But guess what? They can't win that debate. Why? There's no place anywhere in the world where it's a totally free market healthcare system and the outcomes are good. In fact, we moved more towards a so-called free market healthcare system with this Trump care bill, and what are the results? $880 billion cut from Medicaid. So people are going to be kicked off Medicaid. Yes, some will die as a result of that. You have a $600 billion tax cut for the rich, including $200,000 every year going in the bank account of people in the top 0.1%. You have the uninsured rate going from 10% to 19%. You have pre-existing conditions. People can opt out. States can opt out of doing protections for pre-existing conditions. So you have this ragtag bill that's slapped together, and the actual healthcare outcomes are abysmal and way worse. So they can't win that argument. They can't free market, and that's it. Why? Because then there will be more people uninsured. More people will die from not having coverage. It would just be a disaster across the board. So you can't actually win because you can't make an argument based on better outcomes for your health insurance system. So what he's saying is then the debate is all on the grounds of the liberals' perspective, which is it's the government. The government needs to get involved on something like healthcare to assure everybody's okay and that give people coverage. And he says once you're on those grounds, there's no winning any other. You can't win with, hey, I'm for Obamacare and some, a half private, half public kind of regulation of the private marketplace thing. He goes, no, you can't win that argument because then single payer is going to win that argument because they have the better argument. They have the stronger argument. Look, he's right that they can't win that argument, but he's wrong that it's guaranteed a natural progression because there's so much fighting in between that has to happen, and the corporate Democrats are not with us. So that's why we have to make them be with us. Let's make what Charles Krauthammer said come to fruition. In 7 years, let's get it. So, they'll fuck up, the Senate won't pass this bill, and there'll be a giant, progressive wave brought to you by Justice Democrats and Our Revolution and brand new Congress in the midterms and in the 2020 election. Let's rout them, and then let's really push and try to get Medicare for all, because we know 60% of Americans agree with it, by the way, and believe in it. So we might as well do exactly what the American people want when we know the outcomes are going to be better. You're going to cover more people. It's going to cost less. It would make us catch up to the rest of the modern world. In fact, fuck that. Let's be number one in the world in healthcare. There's only one way to do it. Let's make it happen.